CTV's Jeremie Charron is in Ottawa with more on the significance of this. Jeremie.
Good morning, Todd. This is a significant project for sure. You mentioned the $15 billion price tag here. And we're seeing investments from both the federal and provincial governments. You mentioned $5 billion in taxpayer dollars that will go towards this. Half of that, $2.5 billion, is coming from the federal government in the form of tax credits. The other half coming from the provincial government in straight funds, money to support the project. And so this is an investment both by two levels of government in trying to make Ontario a hub for these kinds of projects in the auto manufacturers industry, but also a massive investment from Honda in the province of Ontario in putting work here. We know that, to your point, they already have a facility in Alliston, and we're going to see that facility kind of revamped and expanded and be able to produce fully electric vehicles. You'll have the separate standalone battery plant and then two other facilities that'll produce parts for the battery plant. So this is really establishing, as we heard from politicians today, establishing a supply chain within Ontario for electric vehicles in the future. It's expected this will be kind of fully operational by 2028. And the plant is expected to be able to produce 240,000 vehicles a year, Todd.
Yeah, so that's a lot, obviously. Talk to us a little bit about job creation. I was giving some of the numbers here. It's kind of hard to pin down exactly what it's going to mean, but we do have some estimates anyway, Jeremie.
Yeah, it's estimated about 1,000 jobs this will create. Those are direct jobs. It'll also allow Honda to keep about 4,200 jobs. But then there's also the trickle-down effect. There are indirect jobs that will come out of this. These are massive construction projects, for one. You talked about two other EV battery plants that already exist. Those are still in the works. They're not completed yet. This will be the third here in Alliston. This will be a third in Ontario. But this is a massive construction project that's going to take years. As I mentioned, 2028 is the estimated timeline for when this will all be up and running. So certainly a lot of indirect construction jobs in the short term for the next several years as this continues to be built and the project gets underway. But it's also an investment in the EV industry as a whole. You start producing more electric vehicles locally in Ontario and for all of Canada. You're going to have to build the infrastructure to support those vehicles. It's an investment by the Canadian government and the provincial government, the Ontario provincial government, in the future of transportation, really. We know that commitments have been made to go fully electric by within 15 years, roughly. Establishing a supply chain in Ontario helps you get to that goal down the line, Todd. We hear a lot about the EV industry, and we're seeing it right now that there are some downfalls right now. Sales are down with some EVs. We see Tesla slashing prices. This is an industry that's still kind of in its early stages, if you will, if you compare it to gas-powered vehicles. And so I think it's normal for it to face kind of influx like this. But this is establishing a supply chain locally that will perhaps help incentivize some people to make that commitment to electric vehicles and in turn eventually build more infrastructure. The other thing that's a big challenge for some people is the gap in terms of how much these vehicles cost. Comparatively, you're often talking about a pretty big gap between the price of a gas-powered vehicle versus a comparable electric vehicle. By establishing supply chains like this in Canada, in Ontario, perhaps you can get those costs down at some point through incentives, through different programs and stuff. So there are a lot of opportunities down the line that this creates.
Yeah, questions as well, because we know EV sales are actually declining these days. So we'll see whether this makes sense longer term. We'll check in again, Jeremie. Thanks for this.
Anytime, Todd.